The office was shrouded in darkness, save for the eerie glow of a single laptop screen. Reuven Yosef, a veteran Mossad agent, sat motionless, his eyes fixed on the footage unfolding before him. The target, a defiant Iranian nuclear scientist, paced the room, unaware that his every move was being monitored. Reuven knew time was of the essence. The information this man possessed could unravel a web of deception that threatened global stability. But extracting it would require the agency's most sophisticated techniques, no questions asked. Reaching into his pocket, Reuven retrieved a small device, its surface unmarked save for a single button. With a deep breath, he pressed it, triggering a sequence of events that would test the limits of his interrogation skills. Across the city, the scientist's phone began to ring, its shrill tone cutting through the silence of his safe house. Hesitantly, he answered, his brow furrowing as a familiar voice filled the line. "Forgive me, my friend," the voice said, "but I'm afraid I have some troubling news." The scientist's grip tightened around the receiver, his mind racing. How could his handler have been compromised? As the conversation unfolded, a sense of dread crept up his spine. The handler spoke of betrayal, of a mole within their organization, of a plot that could bring the entire operation crashing down. Reuven watched intently as the scientist's demeanor shifted, his defiance giving way to a growing sense of panic. The psychological warfare had begun, and the agent knew he had to maintain the upper hand. Carefully, Reuven guided the conversation, using subtle cues and carefully crafted statements to sow doubt and confusion in the scientist's mind. He knew the man was intelligent, and that any misstep could prove disastrous. But Reuven had been honing his skills for decades, and he was determined to outmaneuver his target. The scientist's pacing grew more erratic, his breathing shallow. Reuven could sense the cracks beginning to form in the man's resolve, and he pressed on, exploiting every weakness, every vulnerability. As the conversation drew to a close, the scientist's voice trembled. "What do you want from me?" he asked, his once defiant tone now tinged with fear. Reuven remained silent, letting the weight of the question hang in the air. He knew the answer was simple. He wanted the truth, the information that could unravel the conspiracy and save countless lives. But he also knew that the scientist would never willingly surrender such sensitive data. Slowly, Reuven reached into his pocket and retrieved a small vial, its contents glimmering in the soft light of the laptop screen. He held it up, allowing the scientist to see it through the surveillance feed. "Everything," he said, his voice calm and measured. The scientist's eyes widened in horror, and Reuven knew he had won. The battle of wits had ended, and the agent had emerged victorious. With a few keystrokes, he initiated the next phase of the operation, setting in motion a chain of events that would ultimately decide the fate of the world. As Reuven stepped out into the night, he couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The conspiracy he had uncovered was far-reaching, and he knew that the fight was far from over. But for now, he had succeeded in his mission, and that was all that mattered. The Scientist's Secrets, a Mossad thriller. Chapter 2. The Iranian Nuclear Threat. As Reuven Yosef stepped out into the cool night air, his mind was racing with the gravity of the situation. The target was Dr. Farhad Alavi, a brilliant Iranian nuclear physicist who had defected to the West years ago. Alavi's knowledge of Iran's covert nuclear program posed a grave threat to global stability. The Islamic Republic had long been suspected of pursuing nuclear weapons, despite their claims of a peaceful energy program. Reuven knew that Alavi's insider information could expose the true extent of Iran's deception and ambitions. If the world learned of Iran's secret nuclear activities, it could unravel the delicate balance of power in the Middle East, potentially sparking a regional arms race or even military conflict. Reuven had been tracking Alavi's movements for months, ever since the Mossad received intelligence that the scientist had grown disillusioned with the Iranian regime. Alavi had grown increasingly vocal in his criticism of the country's leadership, and Reuven suspected the scientist was on the verge of revealing what he knew. The Mossad simply couldn't afford to let that happen. Alavi's defection and subsequent testimony could derail years of carefully crafted diplomatic efforts to contain Iran's nuclear program. It would also undermine Israel's own covert operations aimed at disrupting Iran's technological advancements, operations that had already claimed the lives of several Iranian nuclear scientists. Reuven knew that securing Alavi's cooperation would be a daunting task. The scientist was a prideful and stubborn man, unwilling to be used as a pawn in the complex geopolitical game. He would need to be convinced that revealing his secrets was not only necessary, but morally justified. As the agent made his way through the darkened streets, he began formulating a plan. First, he would need to regain Alavi's trust, to make the scientist believe that he was a sympathetic ear, someone who understood the gravity of the situation and the need for action. Once that foundation was established, Reuven would slowly begin to sow doubts in Alavi's mind about the Iranian regime's true intentions. He would paint a picture of a corrupt, authoritarian government willing to sacrifice its own people in pursuit of its nuclear ambitions.
Carefully, Reuven would guide the scientist towards the realization that his silence was no longer an option, that by withholding the truth, he was complicit in the regime's deceptions and the potential catastrophic consequences they could have. The agent knew that this would be a delicate balancing act. Alavi was a brilliant, rational man, and he would not be easily swayed by empty rhetoric or emotional appeals. Reuven would need to appeal to the scientist's sense of duty, his desire to make amends for the years he had spent serving the Iranian government. As Reuven approached his safe house, he paused for a moment, considering the stakes involved. If he succeeded in convincing Alavi to cooperate, it could mark a significant turning point in the ongoing effort to curb Iran's nuclear ambitions. The information the scientist possessed could provide invaluable insight into the regime's true capabilities, its hidden facilities, and its plans for the future. But if he failed, the consequences could be dire. Alavi's silence could embolden the Iranian leadership, pushing them to accelerate their nuclear program and potentially develop weapons that could destabilize the entire region. The world simply couldn't afford to let that happen. Reuven took a deep breath and stepped inside, already formulating the next phase of his operation. The clock was ticking, and he knew that time was not on his side, but he was determined to succeed, no matter the cost. As he settled in front of his laptop, the agent's fingers flew across the keyboard, initiating a series of secure communications with his Mossad colleagues. The plan was taking shape, and Reuven knew that the coming days would be a test of his skills and resolve. The fate of the world, it seemed, rested on the shoulders of one defiant Iranian scientist and the Mossad agent who was determined to win him over. Chapter 3. The Strike. Reuven Yosef's fingers moved with practiced precision, initiating a series of secure communications as he finalized the plan to extract Iran's rogue nuclear scientist, Dr. Farhad Alavi. Within hours, a team of highly trained Mossad operatives had assembled in the bustling city of Istanbul, their covers meticulously crafted to blend seamlessly into the fabric of everyday life. Posing as a grieving family, two agents checked into a modest hotel near Alavi's safe house, their suitcases concealing an array of surveillance equipment and tactical gear. Across town, another pair took on the roles of a bickering couple browsing a high-end jewelry store, their keen eyes scanning the crowd for any sign of their target. The operation was a delicate dance, with each member of the team playing a carefully choreographed part. In a crowded market, a young woman in a traditional headscarf struck up a conversation with a local vendor, casually inquiring about the scientist's routine. Nearby, an elderly man in a wheelchair observed the comings and goings of Alavi's safe house, his unassuming presence drawing little attention. As the day wore on, the agents maintained their covers, constantly updating Reuven with the latest intelligence. The scientist's movements were predictable, his daily routine well established. He would leave his safe house at precisely 8 a.m., stopping for a cup of coffee at a nearby cafe before making his way to a nearby research facility. Reuven studied the data, his brow furrowed in concentration. "We'll make our move tomorrow morning," he announced, his voice calm and resolute. "The target will be vulnerable during his commute." The team sprang into action, finalizing the details of their plan. In a discreet salon, a pair of agents transformed their appearances, trading their civilian attire for the uniforms of a local taxi service. Meanwhile, another operative, posing as a maintenance worker, infiltrated the cafe where Alavi was known to frequent, planting a series of hidden cameras and microphones. As the first light of dawn crept over the city, the Mossad team took their positions, each member acutely aware of their role in the intricate operation.
The taxi driver, his features obscured by a cap and sunglasses, waited patiently at the curb, his engine idling. In the back seat, his passenger, a seasoned agent with a striking resemblance to Alavi, quietly rehearsed his lines. Across the street, the maintenance worker, now dressed in a crisp uniform, moved with purpose, seemingly absorbed in his work as he adjusted the cafe's outdoor seating. His eyes, however, were trained on the safe house, waiting for the telltale sign of Alavi's departure. Reuven monitored the operation from his command center, his fingers flying across the keyboard as he coordinated the team's movements. Every second counted, and the slightest misstep could jeopardize the entire mission. As the scientist emerged from his safe house, the maintenance worker sprang into action, subtly drawing Alavi's attention with a feigned equipment malfunction. The taxi driver seized the opportunity, pulling up to the curb and offering the scientist a ride. Alavi, his guard momentarily lowered, accepted the offer, unaware that the driver was an experienced Mossad agent. Inside the cab, the agent turned to Alavi, his voice calm and reassuring. "Dr. Alavi, we need to talk. It's about your work and the threat it poses to the world." The scientist's eyes widened in alarm, but before he could react, the agent continued. "Please, hear me out. I'm not your enemy, but I'm afraid the information you possess could be used to devastating effect. We need your help to prevent a catastrophe." Alavi's brow furrowed as he listened, his initial fear giving way to a cautious curiosity. The agent seized the moment, carefully guiding the conversation, sowing seeds of doubt about the Iranian regime's true intentions. As the taxi navigated the crowded streets, Reuven watched the exchange unfold, his heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and trepidation. The operation was proceeding according to plan, but he knew that the most critical phase was yet to come. With a deep breath, he turned to his team, his voice steady and resolved. "It's time. Bring him in." Chapter 4. The Extraction. The taxi sped through the winding streets of Istanbul, weaving through the morning traffic as the Mossad agent continued his persuasive assault on Dr. Alavi's resolve. "The Iranian regime has lied to the world for years," the agent said, his voice low and urgent. "They've hidden the true extent of their nuclear program, putting us all at risk. But you have the power to change that, to expose the truth and prevent a catastrophe." Alavi's eyes narrowed as he listened, the scientist's initial fear slowly giving way to a conflicted mix of emotions. "What you're suggesting is treason," he murmured, his hands gripping the worn leather of the taxi seat. "It's not treason, doctor," the agent replied evenly. "It's an act of conscience, a chance to atone for the years you've spent serving a corrupt and dangerous regime." He paused, allowing his words to sink in. "We need your help, Farhad. The world needs your help." Before Alavi could respond, the taxi abruptly swerved down a narrow side street, the sudden change in direction catching the scientist off guard. Glancing out the window, Alavi's breath caught in his throat as he recognized the familiar landmarks of his safe house neighborhood. "What's going on?" he demanded, his voice laced with panic. "Where are you taking me?" The agent's expression remained calm, his focus unwavering. "Somewhere safe, Dr. Alavi. Somewhere where you can tell the truth without fear of reprisal."
Alavi's heart raced as the taxi drew closer to the safe house, his mind reeling with the realization that he had been betrayed. He opened his mouth to protest, but before he could utter a word, the taxi lurched to a stop, and the agent's hand shot out, pressing a small device against the scientist's neck. Alavi felt a sharp prick, followed by a wave of dizziness and disorientation. His limbs grew heavy, and his vision blurred as the sedative coursed through his veins. He tried to speak, to fight against the growing darkness, but his body betrayed him, and he slumped back into the seat, consciousness slipping away. In the shadows of the safe house, the maintenance worker watched intently, his finger poised on the trigger of a high-powered rifle. As the taxi pulled to a stop, he caught sight of Alavi's slumped form and knew the critical moment had arrived. With a steady hand, he squeezed the trigger, sending a burst of tranquilizer darts hurtling towards the vehicle. The darts struck true, piercing the taxi's windows and finding their mark in the unsuspecting driver and his passenger. The agent reacted quickly, shielding Alavi's limp body as the darts struck home. Gritting his teeth against the effects of the sedative, he reached for the door, pulling the unconscious scientist from the taxi and into the waiting arms of the maintenance worker. Reuven Yosef watched the scene unfold through the feed from the team's hidden cameras, his heart pounding with a mixture of triumph and trepidation. The extraction had gone according to plan, but the hardest part was yet to come. As the maintenance worker and the agent swiftly carried Alavi to a nearby safe house, Reuven initiated the final phase of the operation. A team of Mossad medics was already waiting, prepared to monitor the scientist's condition and ensure his safe transport. Time was of the essence.
Alavi's disappearance would inevitably trigger a frantic search by the Iranian authorities, and Reuven knew they had only a narrow window of opportunity to spirit the scientist out of the country. Within minutes, the safe house was a hive of activity, with the medical team assessing Alavi's condition and the rest of the Mossad operatives securing the perimeter. Reuven watched the proceedings with a keen eye, his mind racing as he anticipated the potential fallout. Once Alavi was stabilized and deemed fit for transport, the team quickly moved him to a waiting helicopter, its rotors already spinning. As the aircraft lifted off, Reuven let out a long breath, his shoulders finally relaxing. They had done it. They had extracted the rogue Iranian nuclear scientist, securing a critical piece of intelligence that could unravel the regime's deceptions and prevent a potential catastrophe. But Reuven knew that the real battle was just beginning. The world was about to be thrust into a high-stakes game of cat and mouse as the Mossad and their allies raced to uncover the full extent of Iran's nuclear ambitions before the regime could retaliate. The fate of nations hung in the balance, and Reuven was determined to ensure that the truth prevailed, no matter the cost. As the helicopter disappeared into the distance, the agent turned his attention to the next phase of the operation, his mind already formulating the strategies and contingencies that would be required to navigate the treacherous waters ahead. Chapter 5. Fallout. The helicopter banked sharply, the vibrations rumbling through the cabin as it streaked across the night sky. Reuven Yosef gripped the edge of his seat, his knuckles white with tension. Beside him, Dr. Farhad Alavi stirred, the sedative slowly wearing off. "Where are you taking me?" the scientist demanded, his voice hoarse. Reuven met Alavi's gaze, his expression grim. "To a secure location, where you'll be safe, for now."
The words hung in the air, laden with unspoken implications. Alavi's eyes narrowed, his mind racing as he pieced together the events that had led to his abduction. "The Iranian regime will stop at nothing to find me," he said, a tremor in his voice. "You've doomed us all." Reuven shook his head. "You underestimate the Mossad's reach, Doctor. We've taken precautions to ensure your safety and to protect the information you possess." Alavi scoffed. "Information? You think the Iranians will simply accept my disappearance? They'll tear this city apart, hunting for me and anyone associated with my capture." The agent nodded grimly. "We're aware of the risks, but the stakes are too high to ignore. Your knowledge of Iran's nuclear program could change the course of history." Alavi fell silent, his gaze fixed on the passing cityscape below. Reuven watched him, the weight of the situation heavy on his shoulders. He knew that the fallout from this operation would be seismic, with far-reaching consequences that could destabilize the delicate balance of power in the Middle East. As the helicopter banked again, Reuven's phone buzzed with an incoming call. He glanced at the screen, his brow furrowing at the familiar number. "This is Yosef," he answered, his voice low. "Reuven, it's Avi. We've got a situation." Reuven felt a chill run down his spine. "What is it?" "The Iranians are on the move. They've mobilized their intelligence services and are combing the city for any sign of Alavi, and they're not alone." "Who else is involved?" Reuven asked, dread creeping into his voice. "The Russians. Interpol. It's a global manhunt, Reuven. They're all after Alavi." Reuven cursed under his breath, his mind racing. The implications were staggering. If the Russians and Interpol were involved, it meant that the repercussions of this operation would ripple far beyond the Middle East. "How much time do we have?" he asked, his grip tightening on the phone. "Not much."
The Iranians are putting tremendous pressure on the Turkish authorities, and the Russians are flexing their diplomatic muscle. We need to get Alavi out of the country as soon as possible. Reuven glanced at the scientist, who was watching him intently, the fear in his eyes undisguised. "Understood," Reuven said. We'll be ready." As he ended the call, Alavi leaned forward, his expression urgent. "What's happening?" the scientist demanded. "Who else is involved?" Reuven hesitated, weighing his words carefully. "The situation has become complicated. The Iranians are not the only ones searching for you, and time is of the essence." Alavi's face paled. "You've dragged me into a geopolitical nightmare, haven't you?" Reuven nodded solemnly. "I'm afraid so, Doctor, but we're doing everything in our power to ensure your safety and get you out of the country before the noose tightens." The helicopter began its descent, the city lights below growing brighter. Reuven could see the tension in Alavi's posture, the fear and uncertainty etched on his features. "This isn't just about Iran's nuclear program, is it?" the scientist murmured. "There's something more at stake, something that transcends borders and alliances." Reuven met Alavi's gaze, his expression grave. "Yes, Doctor. The information you possess could reshape the global balance of power, with consequences that no one can predict. That's why we need your cooperation and your silence, now more than ever." As the helicopter touched down, Reuven knew that the real battle had only just begun. The world was about to be plunged into a high-stakes game of espionage and geopolitical maneuvering, with Alavi's fate and the fate of nations hanging in the balance. Chapter 6. The Reckoning. The safe house was a hive of activity as Reuven Yosef and his team prepared for the next phase of the operation. Alavi sat quietly in a secluded room, his mind racing with the implications of what he had witnessed.
The agent strode into the room, his expression grave. "Dr. Alavi, I'm afraid we don't have much time. The Iranians and their allies are closing in, and we need your cooperation to get you out of the country safely." Alavi's brow furrowed. "I still don't understand the full extent of what's at stake here. You said the information I possess could reshape the global balance of power. What exactly are you talking about?" Reuven took a deep breath, knowing that the truth would be a bitter pill for the scientist to swallow. The Iranian nuclear program is only the tip of the iceberg. What you know about their covert activities, their ties to terrorist organizations, and their clandestine dealings with rogue states could expose a web of deception that reaches far beyond the Middle East. Alavi's eyes widened. "You're saying the Iranians have been playing a much larger game, one that could threaten the stability of the entire world?" Reuven nodded. "Precisely. And if that information were to fall into the wrong hands, the consequences could be catastrophic." The scientist leaned back in his chair, his mind reeling. "So I'm not just a pawn in some regional power struggle. I'm a key player in a global chess match with the fate of nations hanging in the balance." "Precisely," Reuven said, his voice grim. "That's why we need to get you out of here as soon as possible. The Iranians, the Russians, even Interpol, they're all hunting for you, and they won't stop until they find you." Alavi's shoulders slumped, the weight of the responsibility he now bore evident in his posture. "And what happens once I'm out of the country? Where will you take me?" Reuven's expression softened, a hint of compassion creeping into his features. "We have a secure facility where you'll be able to provide your testimony and share the information you possess. From there, we'll work with our allies to unravel the Iranian regime's deceptions and prevent a potential global crisis." Alavi studied the agent's face, searching for any sign of deception. "And what if I refuse? What if I decide that the risk is too great, and I'd rather go back to Iran and keep my mouth shut?" Reuven's gaze hardened. "I'm afraid that's not an option, Doctor. The world can't afford to have this information kept hidden any longer. You're the key to exposing the truth, and we need you to do the right thing, for the sake of global stability and the lives of millions." The scientist's jaw tightened, his eyes glinting with a mixture of fear and defiance. "So I'm a prisoner then, forced to cooperate under threat of what? Imprisonment? Torture? Death?" "Not at all," Reuven said, his voice calm and measured. "We're offering you a chance to make amends, to use your knowledge to prevent a catastrophe. But if you refuse to cooperate, we'll have no choice but to ensure that the information you possess never sees the light of day." Alavi's face paled, the implication of Reuven's words sinking in. "You're threatening me," he breathed, his voice barely above a whisper. Reuven held the scientist's gaze, his expression resolute. "I'm offering you a chance to be on the right side of history, Dr. Alavi. The choice is yours, but the stakes have never been higher." The room fell silent, the tension palpable as the two men stared each other down. Alavi's mind raced, weighing the consequences of his decision, the potential for global upheaval, the risk to his own life, the weight of the responsibility thrust upon his shoulders. Finally, he sighed, his shoulders slumping in resignation. "Very well," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You'll do it. But understand this, the blood of whatever comes next will be on your hands as much as mine." Reuven nodded, a flicker of relief passing across his features. "Understood, Doctor. Now, let's get you to safety." As the agent escorted Alavi from the room, the scientist couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding.
The events he had set in motion would reverberate across the world with repercussions that he could scarcely imagine. The final chapter was about to unfold, and Alavi knew that his role in it would forever change the course of history. Chapter 7: The Legacy. It had been 3 years since the fateful day when Reuven Yosef and his Mossad team had extracted Dr. Farhad Alavi from the streets of Istanbul. In the intervening years, the world had been turned on its head, the ripples of that operation felt in every corner of the globe. Alavi's testimony had indeed proven to be the key that unlocked a Pandora's box of revelations about the Iranian regime's clandestine activities. The information he provided exposed a vast network of covert operations, terrorist financing, and illicit nuclear research that had been hidden from the international community for decades. The fallout was immediate and seismic. Diplomatic relations between Iran and the West collapsed, with harsh new sanctions imposed and the threat of military action looming. Governments around the world scrambled to reevaluate their relationships with the Islamic Republic, wary of the extent of its deceptions. But the most significant impact was on the global balance of power. Alavi's revelations had shattered the fragile equilibrium that had governed the Middle East, leaving a power vacuum that was quickly filled by competing factions. The Russians, sensing an opportunity to expand their influence in the region, had thrown their weight behind the Iranian regime, while the United States and its allies struggled to maintain their foothold. The result was a new era of geopolitical tension and uncertainty, with the specter of a broader conflict ever present. Nations jockeyed for position, forging new alliances and deploying covert assets in a high-stakes game of chess that stretched from the shores of the Persian Gulf to the halls of the United Nations. Reuven Yosef, now a seasoned Mossad veteran, found himself at the center of this maelstrom, his skills and experience in constant demand. He had become a key player in the global intelligence community, his insights and strategic vision sought after by world leaders and military strategists alike. But the weight of his role weighed heavily on him. The operation to extract Alavi had been a success, but the consequences had been far-reaching and often unpredictable. Reuven grappled with the knowledge that his actions had set in motion a chain of events that had upended the international order with no clear path forward. As he pored over the latest intelligence reports, Reuven couldn't help but wonder about the long-term implications of Alavi's revelations. Had the world become a more stable and secure place, or had the destruction of the old order paved the way for even greater chaos? The scientist himself had been granted asylum in a secret Mossad facility, his safety and well-being guarded around the clock. Reuven had visited him on occasion, observing the profound changes that had taken place in the man. Alavi's once defiant spirit had given way to a sense of profound sorrow and guilt, the weight of his actions clearly weighing heavily on him. "I never wanted this," the scientist had confessed to Reuven during one of their meetings. "I simply wanted to expose the truth, to prevent a catastrophe, but the consequences, they're beyond anything I could have imagined." Reuven had nodded in understanding, his own conflicted emotions mirroring those of the man before him. "The truth is a powerful thing, Dr. Alavi, and sometimes the cost of revealing it is higher than anyone could have foreseen." As Reuven stepped out into the crisp evening air, he couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The world was a more volatile place now, with the potential for conflict and chaos lurking around every corner. And he knew that his role in shaping this new reality would be scrutinized and debated for generations to come. But for now, He had a job to do, to continue navigating the treacherous waters of global espionage, always vigilant, always ready to confront the threats that threaten to upend the fragile balance of power. The legacy of Farhad Alavi's revelations would echo through the ages, a cautionary tale of the consequences of uncovering hidden truths. And Reuven Yosef, the Mossad agent who had orchestrated the extraction, would forever be a central figure in that legacy, a man whose actions had irrevocably altered the course of history. Chapter 7. The Legacy. It had been 3 years since the fateful day when Reuven Yosef and his Mossad team had extracted Dr. Farhad Alavi from the streets of Istanbul. In the intervening years, the world had been turned on its head. The ripples of that operation felt in every corner of the globe. Alavi's testimony had indeed proven to be the key that unlocked a Pandora's box of revelations about the Iranian regime's clandestine activities. The information he provided exposed a vast network of covert operations, terrorist financing, and illicit nuclear research that had been hidden from the international community for decades. The fallout was immediate and seismic. Diplomatic relations between Iran and the West collapsed, with harsh new sanctions imposed and the threat of military action looming. Governments around the world scrambled to reevaluate their relationships with the Islamic Republic, wary of the extent of its deceptions. But the most significant impact was on the global balance of power. Alavi's revelations had shattered the fragile equilibrium that had governed the Middle East, leaving a power vacuum that was quickly filled by competing factions. The Russians, sensing an opportunity to expand their influence in the region, had thrown their weight behind the Iranian regime, while the United States and its allies struggled to maintain their foothold. The result was a new era of geopolitical tension and uncertainty, with the specter of a broader conflict ever present. Nations jockeyed for position, forging new alliances and deploying covert assets in a high-stakes game of chess that stretched from the shores of the Persian Gulf to the halls of the United Nations. Reuven Yosef, now a seasoned Mossad veteran, found himself at the center of this maelstrom, his skills and experience in constant demand. He had become a key player in the global intelligence community, his insights and strategic vision sought after by world leaders and military strategists alike. But the weight of his role weighed heavily on him. The operation to extract Alavi had been a success, but the consequences had been far-reaching and often unpredictable. Reuven grappled with the knowledge that his actions had set in motion a chain of events that had upended the international order, with no clear path forward. As he pored over the latest intelligence reports, Reuven couldn't help but wonder about the long-term implications of Alavi's revelations. Had the world become a more stable and secure place, or had the destruction of the old order paved the way for even greater chaos? The scientist himself had been granted asylum in a secret Mossad facility, his safety and well-being guarded around the clock. Reuven had visited him on occasion, observing the profound changes that had taken place in the man. Alavi's once defiant spirit had given way to a sense of profound sorrow and guilt, the weight of his actions clearly weighing heavily on him. "I never wanted this," the scientist had confessed to Reuven during one of their meetings. "I simply wanted to expose the truth, to prevent a catastrophe, but the consequences, they're beyond anything I could have imagined." Reuven had nodded in understanding, his own conflicted emotions mirroring those of the man before him. "The truth is a powerful thing, Dr. Alavi, and sometimes the cost of revealing it is higher than anyone could have foreseen." As Reuven stepped out into the crisp evening air, he couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The world was a more volatile place now, with the potential for conflict and chaos lurking around every corner. And he knew that his role in shaping this new reality would be scrutinized and debated for generations to come. But for now, he had a job to do: to continue navigating the treacherous waters of global espionage, always vigilant, always ready to confront the threats that threatened to upend the fragile balance of power. The legacy of Farhad Alavi's revelations would echo through the ages, a cautionary tale of the consequences of uncovering hidden truths. And Reuven Yosef, the Mossad agent who had orchestrated the extraction, would forever be a central figure in that legacy, a man whose actions had irrevocably altered the course of history. In the years that followed, the fallout from Alavi's testimony continued to reverberate across the globe. The Iranian regime, reeling from the exposure of its deceptions, lashed out with a renewed fervor, sponsoring terrorist attacks and engaging in a covert arms race with its regional rivals. The threat of open conflict between Iran and its adversaries loomed larger than ever as the world teetered on the brink of a potential regional war. Geopolitical alliances shifted, with Russia and China emerging as staunch allies of the Iranian regime, while the United States and its European partners scrambled to bolster their own positions in the Middle East. The delicate balance of power that had once defined the region was now a distant memory, replaced by a volatile patchwork of shifting allegiances and simmering tensions.
In the halls of power, Reuven Yosef's role in the Alavi operation became the subject of intense scrutiny and debate. Some hailed him as a hero, a man who had helped expose the truth and prevent a potentially catastrophic outcome. Others, however, criticized the Mossad's actions as reckless and short-sighted, arguing that the fallout had destabilized the region and heightened the risk of a wider conflict. As the years passed, Alavi's revelations continued to shape the course of history. The information he provided served as a foundation for a series of high-profile investigations, uncovering the full extent of Iran's global web of deception and illicit activities. This, in turn, led to a sweeping overhaul of international policies and strategies aimed at containing the Iranian threat. The Mossad's extraction of Farhad Alavi had become a watershed moment, a pivotal event that had forever changed the geopolitical landscape. Its legacy would endure, a testament to the power of truth and the consequences of uncovering it, even at the highest levels of global affairs. For Reuven Yosef, the weight of his role would never truly be lifted. He knew that his actions had set in motion a chain of events that would reverberate through the ages, shaping the course of nations and the lives of countless individuals. But he also knew that, in the end, he had done what he believed was necessary to protect the world from the looming threat of Iran's ambitions. As he gazed out at the city skyline, Reuven couldn't help but wonder what the future held. Would the world ever find true stability, or would it forever be caught in the throes of a never-ending geopolitical struggle? Whatever the answer, he knew that he would be there, ready to confront the challenges that lay ahead, his unwavering dedication to his country and his mission guiding him every step of the way.